Hi, welcome to session 18. In this session we're going to talk about jazz, one of my favorite subjects. How to play jazz, how to incorporate jazz into your playing, how to get that warm, round jazz tone. We're also going to talk about chord melody soloing. I did a little bit of that in the intro there. It's taking a melody and adding chords underneath it to make a more impacting solo. Talking about jazzing up your chord progressions or regular chord progressions using chord tones. And we're going to also learn some popular jazz forms like your major seventh chords, your minor seventh chords, and your ninth forms. In the How Music Works section, we're going to learn about ninths, what they are in music, in understanding music, what are ninths, what are elevenths, what are thirteenths. What a great topic. We're going to have a lot of fun today. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, jazz guitar playing is such a great and creative way to add dimension into your playing. So many different things can happen with jazz in harmonically with what's going on with the music. Rather than going just beyond the normal C, G, and D that everybody plays, you throw in some jazz chords, it really adds some dimension to your playing. Now let's talk about some jazz guitars. I'm playing on a Gibson ES335 right here. Very common guitar. You can do a lot of different styles on it. It works real good for jazz. It's got these humbucker pickups, which work real good for jazz. There's also an ES175, which is a thicker model, and that gets a little bit more of a rounder jazz tone. Okay, let's talk about tone for a minute. What makes a good jazz sound for guitars? Well, you don't want anything too bright. So generally, the first thing I do if I want to play jazz is I go down to the amp and I crank up the bass a little bit. I usually roll off some of those highs a little bit as well. Get a little bit more of a warmer, fatter tone. Sometimes I'll go over here to my tone knob and I'll roll the tone back a little bit as well. That helps in taking a little bit of that edge off the sound. That's part of getting that jazz tone, is just taking that edge off the sound. You don't want it as harsh as it is in rock playing. Okay? So that's some secrets to getting a good jazz tone. Also, the type of pick is helpful on that. You want something that's kind of fatter and rounder than a normal pick. It's a little bit thicker. You want at least a heavy pick when you do jazz stuff. I have another one here that I use a lot as well. You see, it almost has no point on it at all. It's just such a round, thick, and that's what you need for jazz guitar playing. Okay. Now let's talk about chord melodies. This is one thing that they use a lot in jazz chord playing. Okay, what do I mean by chord melodies? Well, here's the idea. You have your melody, your single note melody up on top, and then I'm going to try and squeeze in all of the chord tones for the appropriate chords underneath that chord melody. Let's look at that first example in your book. The regular melody goes like this. Okay, that would be a good jazz little lick there. Now if I wanted to put chords underneath it, I kind of go something like this. Ready, go. Now I just added a C major seventh. We're going to talk about those forms here in a second. But I added a C major seventh and an E minor seventh underneath it to kind of give it a little bit of texture underneath it. Makes it a little bit more creative. Let's look at that second example. Okay, just the normal melody is like this. Ready, go. Okay, so now I throw some chords on it. Comes out to be. See how that works? You just want to make sure you're adding chords to the notes in where they appropriately come in the song. And sometimes you have to kind of play around with the fingering of your chord. If your chord, like this C major seventh, usually goes down to this G, but I just needed it down to the E. So I just use it where I need it. I just go down to the E. I don't go all the way through the chord. Another thing they do a lot in jazz is they do, Wes Montgomery was the jazz guitar player that started it. They do octaves. Okay? So I would just, like here I am at the C at the 8th fret and the 5th fret. I use my first and my pinky there. Now I can play it with my pick. And again, I'm deadening that inner string there. But when I go down to the 5th and the 3rd string, I've got to go back to 1 and 3. And same thing with the 6th and the 4th. I got to go 1 and 3 as well. use it with a pick, or I can use it with just my thumb. That's how Wes Montgomery did it. Okay, so that's how Wes Montgomery did it. Let me do those chord melodies that we did earlier. This time I'm going to use octaves with it and see how it changes the sound. Okay, so let's do the first example again. The next example. Takes a little practice to get the feel of using those octaves, but once you do, it's a real neat effect that you can add into your playing. Okay, let me just touch on a couple of very common jazz chord forms that we haven't yet hit. We've hit a bunch of open chords, we've hit some bar chords. Now let's hit on some of these jazz chords that involve a little bit more complex harmony. Your major sevenths, your minor sevenths, some ninth chords. We'll talk more about what's involved in those ninth chords in our How Music Works section here in a second. But let me just show you some of those forms. In jazz, you generally don't want to have open strings. You want to have movable chords. They don't always have to be bar chords, but they do have to be movable chords. It just doesn't get that jazz sound when you have open strings. Okay, so let's look at some of those main major seventh forms first. On the sixth string, the form that I use all the time is this for an F major seventh. Again, you're muting that fifth string, and I don't play that highest first string, excuse me. Now if I wanted one based off of the fifth string, I've got this very common B major seventh form right there. I use it all the time. Anytime you're playing jazz, that's one of my key chords. Another one is, switch my fingers around a little bit, and I have a B major seventh there. Remember that diamond is the pivot note of those movable chords. So I can move it up to here to C major seventh, D major seventh. Okay? Look at that next form, a D major seventh, still based off the fifth string. This time I'm pivoting off of that pinky though. Okay? A major seventh chord. Okay? Now, there's a couple of them that you can base off of the fourth string as well, which I use that quite a bit. This would be like an E major seventh. You got to bar all three strings here with your third finger. Okay? The next one is a G major seventh. Where's the G in this G major seventh? Right there. And you end up having the seventh pitch up at the top. Okay, so those are what, 6 different major seventh forms. That's just about all the major seventh forms that I ever use, is in those 6 forms. So get those underneath your fingers and you'll be able to go a long way in playing jazz because they use an awful lot of major seventh chords. Let's take a look at the next batch, some minor seventh chords. Now we've already found a couple of those when we were back doing our bar chords way back in the earlier sessions, probably session 7 or so. Okay, so we're going to talk about some different forms that are minor seventh forms. Let me just go through them real quick. We have an F minor seventh. That one's a little tough to grab right down here. Some guys just do it like this. F minor seventh, big bar chord. And here's a real common C minor seventh. Right there again. Second finger is that C. Maybe a little bit of a stretch the first time you try it. But I use that one all the time. And of course this guy, C minor seventh there, which you've already been introduced when we were doing our 5th string bar forms. Okay? So we've got major sevenths. We've got minor sevenths. On those major sevenths, I did throw down there in your book, you've got some open major seventh chords that you can use in different forms. Wouldn't sound as great with jazz, but you can use them in other styles of playing that you may need to do. Also want to touch on a couple more. 9th chords. Okay? Here's a good one based off of the 5th string, and pivoting off the 5th string. A C ninth. Where's that C? On that second finger. I don't play, it's just the inside 4 strings, so I don't play the 6th string or the 1st string. So an E flat, 9th would be there. Now there's one off of the 6th string, which is an A ninth, which is a real pretty chord. I use this one a lot too. Again, I'm muting that 5th string, so you can't hear him, and I don't play the last string. If I did, it would end up changing it into a 13th chord. But that's an A ninth, C ninth, A ninth. And those are just some common forms for that. Okay, now let's talk about jazzing up your chord progressions. Well, one of the easiest things to do is add color tones. So if it's a C chord that I'm looking at, I can always add a color tone. Well, what is a color tone? Color tones are tones that are added to the chord, still based off of the major scale. So a C triad is C, E, G, and the major seventh on that would be that extra B. One of the color tones would be like your 9th, 11th, and 13th. Now, which would be a D, would be the 9th. So a C major 9th would be C, E, G, B, D. One way to jazz up chord progressions is just by throwing extra color tones in there. Kind of gives it a sweeter sound. So instead of C and an A minor, let's say, and a D minor, and a G, well, let's say I'm playing jazz. Well, maybe I want to do a C major 7th. Maybe I want to do an A minor 11th. Maybe a D minor 9th. Maybe a G 9th. Something like that. Okay? Just gives it a different color. Let's go through a couple of progressions and see what are some other things that we can do to jazz up our progressions. One of the things that we can do other than adding color tones is adding what's called a 2-5 progression. 2-5s are used a lot in jazz harmony all over the place. What do I mean by that? Well, remember a couple of sessions back we talked about the harmonized major scale. Let's review. If I'm in C, the first chord is C major, C, E, G. The second chord is D, F, A, and that ends up being a D minor chord. That would be our 2 chord. It's a minor chord. If we jump up to the 5th, our 5 chord would be a G, B, and D, and that's back to a major chord. So in any key, if I want to get to that key, I just throw a 2 and a 5 in, and it'll get me to whatever key I'm going in. Let's take a look at that first example. You've got 2 chords there. You've got a C major 7th going to an F major 7th. Pretty common progression. F major 7th. Now that's pretty good, but let's see if we can jazz it up by using the 2-5 of the key that we're going to. So the first measure stays the same, C major 7th. And then, but look, I still have that F major 7th in bar 3, but in bar 2 I'm adding the 2 and the 5 to right before, in the key of F, right before that F chord. Not the 2-5 in C, but the 2-5 of the chord that I'm going to, of the key that I'm going to, which ends up being a G minor and a C 7th. Let's hear how that changes the sound a little bit. Ready, go. Gave it a whole lot more color there, didn't it? In the next exercise, I just do it again. We have the 2-5 going into the F, and then I throw another 2-5 going back into that C if we're going to repeat it. Let's hear how that changes the sound. Ready? Go. 2-5 in F, then 2-5 in C. Now suddenly I've created a much more interesting chord progression by just adding 2 5s. Another good simple rule that you can use is whenever you have a dominant 7th, this would be like a 5 chord, a G 7th, a C 7th, an F 7th, something like that. You can always play around with that 7th and add a bunch of stuff onto that chord. You can add a 9th, you can add 11th, you can add a flat 9, you can add a sharp 9, you can add all kinds of things to that dominant 7th to give it extra color. Let's take a look at those examples. Number 4 in your sheet starts with a C minor 7th to an F7 to a B flat major 7th. Let's say that's our bass progression. Now the next one I have a C minor 7th, and then I throw in an F9 and then a B flat major 7th. So I've given it a little bit of color with that F9 there. Let's see what I did in the next one. Oh, well, wow, I added some color tones. C minor, I turned that into a C minor 9th. The F7, I threw that all the way up to an F13th. The B flat major 7th, I turned him into a B flat major 13th. And then look what I threw in. I threw in a G augmented. That would be like the 5 going back into that C. That would be that form. Okay? So a couple new forms for you, but that's great. Learn all these forms. Write them down. Get them underneath your fingers. Let's try that last one again. See how much that changed the tone of the song that you're trying to do. That's really jazz chord progressions. Add color tones. You can throw some 2/5s in. Always mess around with that dominant seventh. You can get different colors there. Now let's go on to our How Music Works section, and we'll learn what exactly are those 9ths and 11ths and 13ths. In our How Music Works section today, I wanted to continue on learning how music is built together, how these chords are built together. We're almost through. Last time we went over major sevenths and dominant sevenths and minor sevenths. Now we're just going to kick that up one more third, and we're going to add 9ths, and then another third on top of that is 11ths and 13ths. Okay, well, let's talk about some confusion right there. Don't get lost in all the numbers. There's 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths is what we're talking about. Basically, there's the major scale. And then if you can imagine another major scale right next to it, just like 2 octaves of a scale. Okay, so the 9th would actually be the 2nd scale degree. So if I was in C, the 9th would be a D. See how that works? The 11th is actually the 4th scale degree, which would be an F. The 13th in C would actually be an A, same as the 6th. Well, then why bother saying 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths at all? Why don't you just say 2nd and 4th and 6th? Well, when I say 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths, I am telling you, secret by code, that there's a 7th in there. Okay? So a C 9th would be a C, E, G, B flat, and a D. Where'd I get that B flat from? Well, remember our 7th rule from a couple of sessions back. Everything, it's always a flatted 7th unless it says the magic word, major 7th. Okay? Unless it says the magic word. A C 9th did not have the word major in it, so it's C, E, G, B flat, and D. Okay? See how that works? A C2 would have a C, D, E, and a G, but it wouldn't have that 7th in it. So you see kind of the difference? The 9th involves that 7th. That's why it's called that. What would be an F 9th? Think about that at home. What would be an F 9th? Well, let's figure it out. It would be an 1, 3, 5, flatted 7th, because it didn't say major, then 9th. So it'd be in F, it would be F, A, C, E flat, and G. What about a D minor 9th? What would that one be? Well, it'd be 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 9, D, F, A, C, and E. Let's do one more. What about a B flat major 9th? Well, it'd be 1, 3, 5, 7. It did say the word major in there, so it would be a 7, and 9. So in B flat, that would be B flat, D, F, A, and then C. Okay? That's how 9th chords work and how 9th chords are spelled. If we're to kick it up one more notch, we get into 11ths. A couple of quirky things happen when we add 11ths to it. Basically, we just go up another third. So a C 11th would be a C, E, G, B flat, D, and now F. Now, in theory land, I have that E and that F both in that chord, but in practicality, whenever there's that 11th in there, I don't include the third. So it would, in practicality, when I'm actually playing it, I omit that third. Okay, so it'd be C, G, B flat, D, and F. I just dropped that third because it would clash with the 11th. See how that works? In F, an F 11th would be F, C, E flat, G, B flat. Okay? What if I wanted an F minor 11th? Well, then I can still throw that third in there. I don't have that half-step clash like I did before, so it becomes F, A flat, C, E flat, G, B flat. Okay? See how important it is to know your scales, know your keys, be able to spell these chords. When we talk about soloing next section, this is going to become real key in knowing what notes are in these chords as they're coming by on your piece of music. Okay, the last one is 13th chords. Wow, we have covered so many different types of chords. Here's the last one. Okay, I just add one more third on top of that. So a C 13th, well, let me back up. With a 13th, you also, again, you omit that 11th. Okay, because it would clash with that third. So if I'm in C, a C 13th would be C, E, G, B flat, D, F, but I'm going to omit it, and then A. See how that works? So, wow, you've got 7 notes or 6 notes in that chord. You've got an awful lot of notes that you're trying to keep track of. Generally, with the 13th chord, just remember it's the 6th scale step, but you do have that flatted 7th in there. Okay, let's talk about your assignment for this week. Here's your assignment. I want you to practice the new major 7th, minor 7th, and 9th forms. Get them underneath your fingers, be able to play them in different places on the neck. Practice working out a chord melody using the examples in your book. Using the chord examples in your book, try adding some of the extra chords that we talked about and try to jazz up those basic progressions. Practice that Wes Montgomery jazz octave style. You can get a lot of good mileage out of just playing octaves with that. Don't forget to use those Jam Along CDs for a lot more practice. We'll go ahead and see you next time. Okay, welcome to the workshop time. Here's where we get some of these chord forms underneath our fingers so that we can use them. They'll be in our musical tool belt and we can whip them out when it's time to play a jazz song. Okay, first it starts off with the major seventh forms. Let's briefly review them. In the sixth string, on the sixth string, we had that F major seventh. Remember, don't play that last string, don't play that fifth string. What if I wanted to play that F major seventh in a different place? Let's say I wanted a B flat major seventh. Where would it be? In that form right there. What if I wanted a D flat major seventh? Where would it be in that form? Okay. Now, remember some of the forms that we had on the fifth, based on the fifth string? This B major seventh form? Let's jump that around a couple different places. What about an E flat major seventh in that form? What about B major seventh? Okay, I could use some of these other ones. There's a B major seventh there. What about E flat major seventh in another form? Another form. Another form. Another form. Another form. 6 different forms. We should be able to play that E flat major seventh in many different places on the neck. Let's go for some minor seventh forms. Make sure we got those. Okay. What about a G minor seventh? Well, I can do that all kinds of different ways. I can do this one. 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 All kinds of different options depending on where I want to go. If I'm playing up here, I would probably want to grab these up here. If I'm playing down here, there's no sense in me jumping way up here to this G minor seventh. Okay. What about an A flat minor seventh? Where would that be? Well, I can do that a bunch of different places. Here, or here, here, or even this one. Great. What about an F9? Can you find an F9? Remember our ninth form? Well, here's our ninth form, and then all I need to do is move it up to F, and I've got an F9. Or I have my other F form too. I've got to get way up here at the top. F9 up there as well. What about a D ninth? Well, he would be there, or there, if we want to try and do it. If we want to try and do it that way. Let's play through some of the jazz chord exercises that we have in your book. Okay? The first one, we're going from a C major seventh to an F major seventh. A 1, 2, ready, go. F major seventh. Let's do the second one. Ready, go. Here we add that 2-5, G minor seventh, C seventh. Let's do it again, a little bit slower. Number 3, 2, ready, play. Let's do that again. Now, if I wanted to just jazz that up a little bit, I could do something like this. just added a couple little extra notes in there, used basically the same chord forms, and we were able to get a little bit more mileage out of it, almost making it a chord melody thing. Okay? Let's do some of the dominant seventh ones. This would be exercise number 4. Ready? Go. Do it again. Let's go to the next one. 2, ready, go. One more time. The last one is that number 6. There we added a bunch of chords on this color tone. C minor 9th, F 13th, or wait a minute, C minor 9th, we can do it down here. F 13th, B flat major 13th, G augmented. See how that augmented 5th only wants to lean down to that 9th of that C minor. Then the F 13th, I could stay right there if I wanted to. So I'm kind of making a little melody with those highest tones of those different chords. Here we go, number 6. Ready, go. Now I can jazz up the rhythm a little bit. Let's see what else we can do. I just kind of made those bass notes come down a little bit. Great. You can have a whole lot of fun with jazz chord forms, and it just adds probably about 10 or 15 different chords into your repertoire, and it certainly gives you a whole lot more color that you can use. Okay? We'll see you next time.